Love your suit.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to A Safer Space. It's been quite some time since Tim and I posted to A Safer Space, so I thought we'd throw together a clip to make it worth your while to remain subscribed to that alternate channel. So this will be appearing only on A Safer Space and the Safer Space analog over on BitChute. The topic of our discussion this afternoon, probably more like Tim's exposition this afternoon, will be oil in Venezuela and China, and perhaps some other facets of that picture that I have not at all considered. But Tim brought this up. I thought it was interesting, and we would do well to put together a short clip on it. So before we get started, remember to follow this channel, A Safer Space, both here and on BitChute. You can do the same with Semiagog itself.
Send money.
Yes, there's
Soldiers, guns, and money.
There's GoFundMe, and there is Subscribestar, which apparently works now. There's mine. There's Gab. There's BitChute, as I said. There's Twitter. And a Discord server. So all that is out there. You can see links in the description box below this video clip. So with that out of the way, and I should say thank you to all the channel supporters. With that,
Thank you.
With that out of the way, Mr. Tim, you had just started telling me about this before I cut you short and said let's capture this on video so we can share it with the channel followers. Basically, you were talking about China and oil and the situation in Venezuela. Just one or two clips back, we talked about Venezuela, but this is sort of an additional aspect that had not been considered. So what do you have for us?
Well, oil in Venezuela is kind of like a port in, Kenya, Mombasa.
Right, or like Sri Lanka.
Yeah. Just as an aside, I did love the fact that the Russians are setting up to load their gold bars in Venezuela to bring them back to Russia.
Right, however many hundreds of millions of dollars in gold bars being loaded onto planes. Just saw those headlines.
Yeah, that's good. Russians understand revolution. They do. They understand revolution real well. The Chinese obviously don't. Probably being because they're a little closer to their revolution than the Russians. But at any rate, the thing is that China loaned a lot, billions and billions of dollars to Venezuela. And Venezuela was unable to meet the payments.
So that's typical, for the whole set of arrangements that China likes to make with countries.
Called neocolonialism, yeah. So what they did was they said, well, just pay us in oil. And the Venezuelans said, sure, we'll do that. The only thing is the oil price fell, thanks to Trump. And golly gee, they weren't able to make the payment still. So China wound up owning 49% of Venezuela's oil industry. That's straight through, bam. Hi, this piece belongs to China. Now, how much more it's got through various and sundry other niggling and snigglings, I have no idea. But 48% is a good piece of it. Considering that large sucking noise you hear in the background is probably the oil in Lake Maracaibo going straight to China. Which explains why the Russians were not building that pipeline to China as hard as they were. But be that as it may, China basically bankrupted Venezuela. Venezuela's difficulties are based on a minor finagle and fiddle here and there by the Central Intelligence Agency, but mostly Chinese removal of Venezuela's one resource, which is oil. I mean, let's face it, Venezuelans are famous in Colombia for having big feet, and that's it.
What?
They have big feet, lots of money.
I'm missing some reference. You mean literally they're famous for the people having larger feet?
Sure, they're bigger folks. They ate better. That's what I got told when I was down in Colombia buying shoes, that I had Venezuelan feet, big feet. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Didn't have the delicate little feet that Colombians have. I
Oh,
don't know.
as best I recall, you do have delicate little feet.
I do. I have delicate little feet, but I have Venezuelan feet. They're big, bigger than
The Colombian standard.
Colombian feet. Yeah, the Colombian standard.
So this is a situation where you're saying that the major cause of Venezuela's crash is games that China has been playing.
Yes,
Now
I am.
here's a question for you.
Alrighty.
Do you think that, because I know nothing about this, absolutely nothing about this. So save those comments you're about to make. I could.
I was just. Yes, go ahead.
So I was basically thinking to myself, is this all about them trying to pull a Sri Lanka or a Mombasa type arrangement? Is this all about them trying to do what they've done elsewhere to cause the financial situation to have the bottom drop out of it, and then they could take possession of it? Or is this perhaps an intentional program to have Venezuela fall apart so that they can take control of even more? And I mean, these are not mutually exclusive, but and drive the weaponized refugee population in various directions to attain their ends.
This is a miscalculation on their part, Oliver. Total miscalculation. They did not anticipate exactly how much difficulty Venezuela was going to have. There isn't much that China can do at this point to save its investment in Venezuela. They can't ship Chinese oil people over there because that still leaves the population hungry. And China's not used to having an unruly population.
Yeah, and I imagine Latins are a little more prone to acting out than your average Chinese.
I think so. On top of which, Venezuelans don't really give a shit about what is that thing the Chinese have now?
Social credit scores.
That's it. Social credit scores. They don't give a shit about that. They want frijoles and tortillas and shit like that, with meat, food, beans. You may have noticed that one of the things that the Venezuelan refugees were complaining about was Colombians were feeding them food for animals, which is to say, frijoles. Venezuelans are used to a middle class and above lifestyle. Lots of meat. Hard to find a chicken.
Yeah, apparently it's hard to find a cat or a rat or a pet dog. Although I have no idea whether or not that's exaggeration.
Doesn't matter. It sure is believable.
So here's my. Well, I want to follow up with this notion that China.
I remember this, a safer space.
Yes, it is. But there's this idea that China has miscalculated. If so, it seems like this is going to be an enormous miscalculation. I mean, for them to basically they put the squeeze on, and instead of it yielding compliance for them, they broke their pet.
Yeah, they sure enough did. Now, the CIA has had a hand in that, the Christians in Action. They've had a little hand in making sure that they broke the pet, but they waltzed right into breaking the pet.
Right. So they should have foreseen that as a possibility.
Huh, you suppose?
So it's not strictly socialism that caused this to fail. You think it's more the the Chinese leech just drew too hard on the host.
Well, that is a form of socialism, isn't it?
Well, I guess, yeah. Well, there it
Yeah.
is.
Chinese were just using somebody else's money.
Yes, yes, indeed, as is always the case.
Well, that's the kind of stuff you get with China.
Well, it would seem to be exactly what you get too with transnational or global socialism, which is a
Really?
variant
Oh
that
my!
China's pushing. You don't even have the national boundaries to sort of limit, who can draw and to what extent.
Well, when you own 48% of the oil industry, you kind of start drawing a big suck when it runs out that 48% of the revenues that should be going to the country, Venezuela, aren't even on Venezuela anymore. They aren't even converted, except at China's bank, where they're converted to a payment against a loan. It's lovely stuff, Ollie. It's lovely.
So, what do you think all this portends?
Crash!
Just more and more crash and burn type shit. I mean, here's the thing: it suggests that China is going to insist on playing some continuing role there in order to recoup what it's paid out.
China may insist upon it, but will the new government in Venezuela
Honor its previous,
permit it?
yeah, honor its previous agreements.
No, it hasn't made any previous agreements with Venezuela. I mean, with China. That was Maduro's government.
Well, that's why I referred to it as a previous agreement. Another
Well, you
government.
can refer to it as previous agreement as much as you like. No, the people of Venezuela deserve a good deal in this regard. I imagine we're going to have Chapter 47 out of the art of the deal come through here in a little bit.
So you've got China, and they're about to be, what's that you used to say, sucking hind tit?
Yeah, they're going to be sucking hind tit.
But literally like a litter of animals trying to get up in there,
Mm-hmm.
and get something out of it. And it's not going to be forthcoming. As you just mentioned, the Russians have already said, fuck this. They're loading up gold and leaving.
Wonder how much that gold really belongs to them. No, never mind.
Yeah, or that's just, buying some sort of future security for somebody or other.
Oh, you don't suppose all the generalissimos are needing some of that gold out of there, do you?
And that'd be interesting that the Russians are carrying it away, because that's not the same thing as the Chinese carrying it away, which
No, it's
suggests that those people whose agreement with the Chinese may well have fallen through are not going to be going to hang out in China when they have nowhere else to go. They'll instead go to Russia.
Well, way down upon the whatever river. Yeah.
Okay, well then, to make this a quick one, can I ask you here towards the close what you think all this portends in general, and specifically as regards what we're doing or will do in Venezuela, and what may go down in terms of the relationship between China and Russia regarding all this that's happening in Venezuela, right?
Well, there's going to have to be a little more work put in on that pipeline to bring oil to China from Russia. That's going to have to be a biggie.
So Russia does well, and China is now forced to have to go back to the table and address its energy needs through Russia. So it's a good thing for Russia.
Gee, you don't suppose that's that bone you were talking about that Trump's going to throw to Putin, do you?
I was thinking there must be one, but I certainly didn't see any of this.
Well, that's just the way it is, Ollie. You see, you put that little pebble on the board just at the right spot, and it divides the territory.
And then what would you say as
Uh-huh.
the wrap moment here as regards the U.S. and Venezuela with all this? And maybe throw in China because now China is going to be like, fuck
Well,
you very
China's going to
much.
be running around in circles, pulling its hair out because, in my estimation, the Venezuelans are going to do exactly what China did with uh, all its pre-revolutionary agreements with all the powers that were when they got a new leader in. You may recall a whole bunch of yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to keep this, a safer space type read instead of just laughing and spewing, rearranging my phlegm, as it were, at the expense of the Chinese and the Venezuelans and the Russians. Though the Russians are getting the best deal, it's the real thing with us and the Venezuelans is going to be we're going to use them to take up the slack in Saudi and U.S. oil production, which we're going to drop after we bring in Venezuela. We're going to use Venezuela, which has the most oil in the world, makes the Saudis look like they're sitting on a spit pool. Uh, we're going to use them to drive the price of oil lower, you see. And that's good because then Russia can turn around and say, well, golly, with the price of oil being what it is, the Chinese got to pay for that pipeline. Whoops.
Yeah, but now what does that do?
Whoops.
I want to wrap this, but I can't let this
Oh,
question
okay.
slide past. I'm not sure I can see Trump doing anything to dial down our domestic production, which is finally booming now for the first time since the days of Pennzoil, when Pennsylvania was the world's largest producer of petroleum. I mean, it's been quite some time since the U.S. has had any real role as an energy exporter, and that is the fact that we're doing it now is in large part driving the good economic numbers that Trump is able to present. So, I mean, do you really think he's
But he
going to?
doesn't have to. He doesn't have to drive it at quite the rate he's driving it. He can continue to keep our production up, but just let it level off. He can continue to let the Saudis dump in their little bit, but teaching Saudi Arabia that maybe you're not as essential as you thought you were, big Arab bedsheet wearing motherfucker. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That's safer space, safer space.
Right. And so then we have the idea that Russia takes a hit from it too. And yet,
Mhm.
the bone that's been thrown is that they can make up for some of that with the size of the market and that sucking sound you referred
Uh-huh.
to in terms of
Yeah,
energy needs coming out of China.
yes. Uh-huh. On top of which the Chinese get spanked real well
Yeah, they do because
without, yeah,
they're
without anybody really realizing how or why.
because Huawei shit's about to happen. With
Oh, that's all
I
bullshit.
know it's just a side deal, but that's going to be teeing up some stuff with 5G and intellectual property and technology theft. That angle's
Got a lot
coming.
more to do with technology theft and 5G and so on
But
than it does with any of the rest.
right, but that's one dimension of what's about to hit China.
Like,
Another dimension is the pressure as regards North Korea. Another dimension is this energy aspect that you just talked about. And another dimension is the tariffs and the so called trade war. So this Venezuela thing couldn't conceivably come at a worse time for China and Mr. Xi.
oh my goodness, you don't suppose G's sitting around going, oh, gee.
All right. Well, then, your final words, then, Tim.
Well, I just look at this from the standpoint of it's such a wonderful life, Ollie. It just goes on and on and on. And it seems to me that no matter how we look at this, what we have here is failure to communicate.